So it's been a while, around a month. Another database is about Jews, and there's quite a lot to talk about in terms of new games, new shows, Xbox, PlayStation. Everyone's got new things coming up, so it's really a good time to jump into it. Next week, the first one will be Sony, so we'll start there with their summer state of play. So this is really a summary of things I think will be shown. The first one, obvious one, is Spider-Man 2. Insomniac have launched something that's been, for my opinion, one of the standout teams for Sony since they picked them up a few years ago, and they've certainly been almost single-handedly for the PlayStation 5's launch, one of the biggest impact in terms of showing off the potential of the PlayStation 5. So we saw Spider-Man itself, the remastered version, and then we saw Miles Morales, and obviously we saw Rift Apart, which really kind of pushed the benchmark in terms of PlayStation 5 visuals getting closer to offline renders in terms of the Pixar holy grail. It's not there, obviously, but you know the whole point was it was a great-looking title for the PlayStation 5 way back in the early days of its launch. And along with things like Demon's Souls and Bluepoint, I think it really gave everyone an example of just what the PlayStation 5 can deliver over and above the previous generation. So that was great, and I think we'll certainly see Spider-Man 2 there. I certainly think it will be a very impressive showing. They've had quite a few years, I think, working on this technology. Remember a lot of the work they've done for the previous remasters, Miles Morales, the updates, PlayStation 5, and certainly, in my opinion, the very best ray trace reflections on consoles across anything. I don't think there's anything that's used ray trace reflections as well. And in fact, I'm amazed at how well they got that game to run, the amount of reflections on so many materials and surfaces, how much they fitted into the BVH, and even the fact that they used a reconstruction technique to improve the resolution output on the final reflections. There's so many good things in Spider-Man, which I think paves the way for having this version maybe improve on that significantly, or certainly having it used more often in some interiors and more reflections and materials, certainly in characters, eyes, armor. I think that'll be a good place to show off. But I also think that they'll show off animation, traversal, and probably fix one of the issues that I called out in my review at the time, which was a shame, which was the game still had loading screens. You still went from an interior to exteriors, which Miles Morales generally fixed, but there were still some fades to black. So I'm hoping that they improve their streaming technology. Not that it needs it, but it's certainly one of the demands of the PlayStation 5 and expectations that we have a world where you just start the game, no loading screens, like God of War kind of pushed back on the PlayStation 4 consistently. So I expect to see some incredible animation, because the team are very good at that, ramp up the effects, the battles, the enemies, and the exploration in the city, and certainly, hopefully, add more to do in the cities. And I think one thing they will add here is co-op, online co-op, using, or even maybe split screen, who knows, you know, something you never put anything past them. But you certainly have Miles Morales and Spider-Man, and obviously on top of that, you'll potentially have Venom. So 3-player co-op online, or even a multiplayer option built into the game as well. So I think that's one area that they'll look to push the title out and just generally give more to do around the city. So I think Spider-Man 2 will be a big headline grabber at the show, absolutely, and understandably so. Even if myself, I'm far, far more involved in Wolverine, that's a much better character for me. I hope that they really push that out as well. I'm really glad that Insomniac have got that, but I don't think that'll be shown here next week. I think that's quite a way off, and they won't want to kind of muddy the water by showing off Spider-Man and Wolverine, because I think they're going for very different markets, and I'm certainly more Wolverine in terms of my personal preference. Next one is one that everyone will know that I've been talking about, hinted about for a long time. I think it's one of the worst kept secrets in the industry at this point, because everyone's known about it for ages, but Metal Gear Solid 3 remake, remaster, whatever you call it, pretty sure that this will be the time that they'll show it off. There's been some online hints now from some of the actors involved, musicians, so I think that this has kind of been going on forever. It's likely a Sony studio that have done the work. The rumours are it's Bluepoint that have done the work, and that makes a lot of sense. They certainly could have had a parallel team working on that. That's what I'd heard many, many moons ago. And Konami have just licensed that out. So they will own it, probably still publish it, I would imagine, maybe joint publishing. But the team internally with Konami, I don't think they would have done it. I don't think they've got the team to do it. They certainly don't have Hideo Kojima anymore. So there is potential that Kojima was still involved in this. He's got a very close relationship with Sony first party. Obviously, he's using their Decima engine. I'm not saying it's using Decima. I don't know what it's using. But really, I expect it to be Unreal Engine. And I do expect some other announcements alongside it. So potentially a full-on remake of arguably the most loved, and the one that I covered many moons ago in my retro, nearly 10 years ago now, my retro review of the whole series. Metal Gear Solid is one of my standout titles, and certainly series is on my channel. I love the title. I think it's an incredible one. Even Metal Gear Solid 4, which I think has a lot of benefits, and it's still a Sony exclusive, still a PS3 exclusive. I think what we'll see here is potentially a 1 and 2 remaster update, improved, potentially taking the GameCube version of Metal Gear Solid 1 and razzing that up with Metal Gear Solid 2, and then the full remake potentially, or it's just going to be the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. What engine they use, possibly Unreal Engine 4, possibly Unreal Engine 5, I don't know. But I imagine that this will be a big announcement. I would suspect that they acknowledge Kojima in some way, even if he's not involved. He might have been an advisory. They could do anything just to, appease the fans with the whole split between Konami and them. Not that I think they should, or that it even matters. This is the grown-up world. People leave companies for good reasons, bad reasons. Sometimes they fall out. Sometimes it's just, creative decisions means that people don't get on anymore. It's not as if Konami needs Hideo to continue. They've not really done much for their own basis and IPs anyway, and Hideo certainly doesn't need them. So I don't think they need to do it. I don't think he's going to add much value to a remake anyway, unless they make significant changes to the title, which I don't suspect they will. So most of it will purely be a cosmetic update. Potentially new features, new updates, new things that later games had. That is always an option. Online is certainly going to be a potential thing that they add to it here, but fundamentally, it's going to be a modernisation on the level of Demon's Souls. That is the whole target behind the game. It'll be very interesting to see what the deal is, what it comes out at, if it's actually shown. There's no guarantee of this, obviously, but that's what I expect. I expect Naughty Dog to be there with Factions showing off The Last of Us, because that's kind of long overdue now. It would have been perfect to drop that alongside the huge hit of the Last of Us HBO show that they had, but obviously timings and issues and all those kind of fundamentals of delivery means that it never happened. But I think it's about time now that they show something off. So I expect we will see Factions here at the show. Ghost of Tsushima 2. I don't expect much, but there is a possibility, in my opinion, with the film in the works, and I think this is where Sony are working towards, and I'll get to that in a minute, but with a film in the works of Ghost of Tsushima, I expect Ghost of Tsushima 2 to potentially get announced this year. So it might be a perfect place to do it here. It might not. It's I would say 50-50 whether it gets shown or not, but I think it will be great. One of my standout titles of PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. Loved it. It's almost the perfect open world game for me, because you can just get distracted, or you can concentrate with the excellent, combat, but also just get on with the adventure and the storyline and not get dragged into all the busy work that open world games kind of push you down. Visually, very impressive in terms of artistic delivery. The 60 FPS patch was a great boost, I think, on the PlayStation 5. The fact that it came for free, along with that director's cut and the additional DLC island that came with that. So, yeah, there's definitely potential here. It's 3 years ago that it shipped. They've obviously been working in the background. They're not a massive studio, so I would expect it's a year off, maybe 18 months. So, this time next year, getting close to a Christmas release, I don't know. It could be a perfect early launch as well for them next year, maybe 2024. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible. I do think that we'll see Death Stranding 2, possibly some gameplay shown on that. We've had the reveal quite a while ago now with the amazing cinematics, and certainly showing the improvements that Kojima have delivered on the visual aspect in terms of character model, rendering, and getting to grips with Decima, and obviously improving it. And he's been acknowledged. The team are very, very intelligent. They know what they're doing. They're very technically driven. Certainly up to the level of Guerrilla in terms of being very supportive of all of their technology. Guerrilla have really excelled, I think, in my opinion, in terms of working across the breadth of issues with development. So it's not just the technology in terms of what gets to screen, but it's how you get things to screen efficiently. So you saw with previous Horizon games, they used procedural generation. They've used a lot of online server-based asset management, being able to play the game in the engine, tweak the game in the engine, all of that, which Unreal Engine is, adding in their latest updates as well. So a lot of it is around using tools intelligently and streamlining that development process. And Kojima is a master of that in terms of the whole team, not just him himself. There's a wider team there, experienced individuals that know this industry inside and out. They know their art, they know their craft. And I think that the Decima balance between the two would be That's a good example, those two, of a strategic partnership. Whenever I mention that in my videos, that's what I mean. Strategic partnerships kind of benefit both parties. It's really good for Sony to be associated with the talent that is that Kojima studio and Kojima Productions, and what that team can make and what they have made. The speed at which they delivered it wouldn't have been possible without the support of Sony and the Decima engine. So that is kind of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's likely to be an ongoing process with the team, and obviously just working on more and more partnerships, I would assume, in the future. I do think you'll get dabbles of things that are coming very soon. So Final Fantasy 16 will turn up in a very brief form. Street Fighter 6 is likely to turn up as well in terms of a brief form, but nothing big, because we've already seen quite a lot of both those titles, and they're about due out, and there's already been a beta of Street Fighter 6, which, just a little digress, I was going to cover it, and I was just amazed at what Capcom have done to such a great franchise. They kind of merged it all together, but it feels like an old Dreamcast game, and 30 FPS in an online fighter is just, it blew my mind. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do with the final game on this, but the issues in the title itself, in terms of, performance, netcode, everything else, just seems very, very bad. So when I do get around to reviewing it, because I love Street Fighter, I like beat 'em ups, it really let me down. Not going to lie, it let me down severely. But anyway, digress. So yeah, they'll probably do a little glimpse and catch up on that, and just reiterate the release dates, and then they're into new IP. There's a great deal they could show. I have no idea what they are. One of them that I do suspect is Fire Sprite's VR title. They obviously made Persistence, which was a great title on PSVR. They made Call of the Mountain, or at least they worked heavily with the Guerrilla on that, which was a standout title in terms of my PSVR 2 review coverage. Heavily physics driven, and I hope very impressive in terms of the game itself, and certainly ramping up the interest and the hype for PSVR 2, because Call of the Mountain, even though it didn't set the world alight, it did a lot of things right, and its physics interaction, which I covered in my review, was incredible, and I hope that they can really push forward on that, because I think it works so well in VR, because it amplifies the reality of the world that you're in. And sticking with new IPs, there's obviously quite a lot from all the studios that could be out. There's the space science fiction Naughty Dog title that's meant to be rumoured there, so that could be shown. But there's many other things. The thing about new IPs is it's new IP. So Ben Studio could show theirs off. They've got one that's using multiplayer and open world. That could be there as well. So that's a potential one to be shown off. But then I really want to get into the other area of the show, which is PSVR 2, which I think needs to get attention, and it needs something to ramp up the energy levels, because we had a good launch. We had some great titles, still got some great titles. I've got some more coming up on my channel that I'm covering. But it needs more than it's got, and it needs to reinvigorate it. So one of them is Firewall Ultra. Now, Firewall Ultra is a sequel to the original title, which was one of my standouts on the PSVR 1. So that title itself was absolutely incredible. The work the team did on Firewall Zero Hour, I think, Zero Hour, it was an incredibly good game. It was Rainbow Six, basically, online, and I reviewed it on my channel back then. So I expect this one to get pushed hard, as it will be, again, an online co-op shooter. So there's 4v4, PvP, PvP, PvE. It uses foveated rendering to improve the visuals. It's got real-time lighting, so lights and shadows. It's got all the tactical elements. So again, just like Rainbow Six Online, it's so good. And I expect this to get a full reveal and gameplay here, with a big push on its launch later this year, because this will be the first one that's kind of really pushing hard from Sony themselves with an online. So with a bunch of people trying to complete a mission, and you're all trying to stay alive and get the firewall or get the briefcase and not blow everyone up and keep people alive. It's so tense and enjoyable, and above all else, it's fun, because it's kind of the games you can play in short stints and have just a great laugh online. So I am looking forward to that one, and this could be a place for it to shine and obviously kick off that VR2 post-launch phase where we get into the next set. And there's other titles. Hubris is one that's been shown off and released on PC. I think that's got a great potential to be a standout title on PSVR 2. Could be improved again, some of the stuff that Sony help out improving that, and the visual quality there is very high. But I do think that there is a very big potential that Half-Life Alyx could be revealed here for the PSVR 2. Again, around strategic partnerships and all the things around Steam Deck and Valve's, making probably one of the best VR titles there is. It would be a perfect fit for this. And if they can announce that here with a deal exclusively bringing it over from PC, which may, again, strategic partnerships, I think there'll be something coming out of that going both ways. That would be huge hype. And let me tell you, Half-Life Alyx is an incredible VR game. And then there's other stuff like Boneworks. Potentially a new Astrobot VR title would be huge, as it is generally one of the best VR titles ever. It's just incredibly good fun. And it's so intelligent in its design, which is obviously what Asobo Studios do all the time. They're so good at thinking outside the box, and like I said in my review at the time, they simplify to intensify. They don't convolute it with loads of on-screen tutorials and prompts and all that rubbish that gets in the way in modern games now, which I hate. Modern games have gone really bad in terms of pointing you everywhere with colour schemes, and it's just boring. I like to be gently eased into a game, or just left to figure it out, die and succeed, because that's the kind of stuff I grew up with playing in the 8-bit era, from the 70s, early 80s. That's kind of the games that I grew up playing. So I enjoy that, and I think that Astrobot, when it comes, there's no ifs, that it will, that will be a huge title, and I think they'll really utilise all of the features of the PSVR 2, and that could be a good one to kick off, the excitement levels here. There's loads of other VR titles they could push. Like I say, there's a few that I'm covering on my channel shortly. So there's a lot of options here in terms of expanding the market. And I do think that, when it comes to PSVR 2, I do think that now that it's in stores, and now they've got some titles out, they get demos on the store as well, and get a release plan over the next 2 years to keep building up VR. It's going to be slow. I've said this before. It's got to keep going, but they've got to keep some momentum up. And at the moment, it's gone quite quiet. And I do expect that in about, a year, 18 months' time, there will be an update release for the PSVR 2 headset to work on a PC. I said that in my review, and I do expect it. I think it will boost the headset more, because it will mean that they can, extend the revenue stream, so they're not losing money on it. It will grow VR overall, so they've got more revenue streams. They can port games over, so all of their first-party stuff, like Call of the Mountain, can go to PC, just like they do. Not day and date. They're never going to do that. In fact, they've only just recently said that, reinforced what I said years ago, they wouldn't do that. But they need to keep revenue streams in. So 2 years after the titles come out on PS5 or PSVR 2, they can release it on PC. And that will help development. That will help the PC space as a whole. And it helps the PS5 VR space. So overall, again, expect some of those strategic partnerships that I mentioned to spread into the PC space as and when it works. And VR, certainly it will work that way. And then I do expect them, like I said before at the start, to move into this whole movie area, TV, films. So they've had The Last of Us already. They've got God of War coming. A lot of influences outside that are showing them that that's the way to go. Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 movies. And most recently Mario, that hit over $1 billion at the cinema. So that means it's a viable market, and Sony will be going in on that and expanding their portfolio and bringing more from established brands into that. So I do expect Horizon to get a TV show or a movie, and more on the Ghost of Tsushima movie and potentially the Gran Turismo films to be shared here as well. And expect this to be a big push in the coming years to kind of manage releases with shows as they kind of coincide and create huge hits, as they just had with The Last of Us on the HBO, which helped boost sales of games on the PlayStation 5. I think The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 went back into the charts, back into the top 10. And so that you can't underestimate the kind of impact of just raising the profile of something. It makes people go out and buy something that's already available, or rebuy it if they've already played it. And this all aids Sony's profits this year. And supply chain issues kind of out of the way now with PS5, and potentially here they could even announce the PS5 Slim with that detachable drive, and also this Q-Lite handheld thing. I just want to touch on this in a minute. It could be at the show. It could absolutely be at the show. I do think it exists, and in fact I think the recent Sharp leak about the LCD is pointing to this. I think this is the deal, that it is. But if you think about what it is, a lot of the things that happen in this gaming space, people live in their own echo chamber or their own bubble. It's very hard to look outside what you're used to. We aren't the only market that Sony are going after, and they're trying to push hard in their Japanese market. I mean, Ghost of Tsushima is a good example. That was a big seller over there, and that's hard for the Japanese market because a lot of them are into mobile gaming, just like China. So this Q-Lite device makes a lot of sense when you think about it from that perspective. If you can have a handheld that allows you to stream all your games from your PS5 wherever you are, and or play online with cloud-based games, all the retro stuff like the PS2, PS3 stuff that you play online. You can play all those using that handset as well. A decent LCD screen, good set of speakers, and basically a DualSense in your hand that allows you to stream directly from your device in your own house makes a lot of sense. And it would do well to launch in Japan and probably ramp up sales of PlayStation 5s, because people would buy them and then use the device on the train or at work or whatever they might be, because mobile gaming is so, widely adopted. And then it could spread to EU, UK, US. You'd have a lot of areas where it could go. So yeah, it could be announced here. Probably not. It might cloud muddy the waters a little bit in terms of what they're showing off. But that device does make some sense to me. So I'm not entirely unconvinced that it won't and doesn't exist. That's it for PlayStation. So moving on to the next big one, Microsoft. So they've got their show a few weeks later in June. And Starfield is a big one. That's the big game for this year. And it needs to be good. Let's not beat around the bush. Performance issues, bugs, lack of variety, they'll all must be a nail in the coffin. For the most diehard fans aside, I think it'll be make or break. Starfield has a lot resting on it, and it has a lot of expectation, not unjustly, because of where Microsoft have been. So this show needs to be good. So they need to come out with that. I don't think they're going to spend much time in that, because I think there's a whole developer direct about that afterwards for an hour. So you'll get that. You'll get Forza 10, because that's coming at the end of the year, but that's kind of bread and butter. It'll be full of ground up excitement about all the technology, and it is very good. There is technology there is a benefits that it's going to offer, but it's pretty standard. It's safe. Forza 10's technology, the ray tracing, the new time of day, it's all good technology, but it's not brand new technology. It will sell well. Racing games is a safe bet, so they need more than that. I think Hellblade 2 needs to be there. It probably will be a next year game for launch, but it needs to be shown off. It's in Ninja Theory, they've got an exceptionally talented studio, and they've certainly got their head around Unreal Engine 5, as they've already shown. So Hellblade 2 needs to just ramp up more than just great animation and cutscenes and facial capture and all that. It needs to have good gameplay, and I think that's one area that they need to push at this show overall. And they've got the opportunity here, I think. They've got, some games they've announced, whether they announce new IPs as well, which they could. Avowed is a good idea. So Avowed is a game that I think would be great, working in that Pillars of Eternity, world. That could be a great stopgap for other titles. And if they announce it and get gameplay up and they're close to getting something out, then Obsidian would have another win on their hands. I think Grounded was a great game, but it was definitely an indie game. This Avowed needs to be bigger. It needs to be at the level of probably not Elder Scrolls, but it needs to fill that gap for a bit. I think that's a perfect chance for them to try and broaden their market, and the PC market is very into those kind of games as well. So that'd be a good one for Game Pass, and that could ramp up people on there. I don't think, but I would hope that Fable would be there. But Playground really know what they're doing. I'm sure it's 2 years or more away from release. And a full gameplay reveal here with their British humour, open world beauty, and a strong RPG could be a huge hit. There's a lot of options in Fable that's not just having an RPG of an older title brought forward. It could have a lot of online functionality, co-op play, like the Fable they had in development years ago that they can. And that'll add, 4-player online co-op gameplay. So there's definitely aspects of that original title that they could bring into the modern world. It could, push some of their Game Pass areas, or certainly online. But it really needs to be a visual standout from Playground, and they can deliver on that. They can get the wow factor easily. So I think that's one that they should and could push if something is ready to be shown. I don't think Perfect Dark will be there. I think it'll miss it, which is a shame, because I think that's something that would have been a great hit. Microsoft need to improve on that area of managing their studios and making them deliver on something, because again, this is another one that feels like it's fallen down the cracks again, and that happens a lot. We keep saying this a lot about Microsoft stuff. They need to get everything working. Halo, they've managed to ruin that. We've just had what should have been a big hit in Redfall, a complete disaster, and now we've got Starfield that definitely has signs that in their previous is there that they could have issues on that as well. So yeah, there's definitely areas here that I still feel nervous about. One big area that I think would be a good win for them, if they can deliver on it, would be Gear 6. It's an Unreal Engine 5 title, as we know, and gameplay, along with in-game real-time cinematics and a reveal of that area, could be great here. If they go back to the dark, gritty, violent roots, that would really, really help. I think Gears 5 was just too bright, and I didn't really like it. It didn't feel like Gears anymore. Certainly from an artistic and a narrative-driven aspect anyway. And it could be a good closing section for the show, or earlier. You know, they could really show off an UE5 remake of Gears 2, or possibly a collection of all three, which could be great for them. A great winter hit, and in fact, it would make perfect sense in terms of big hype, a big hype vehicle itself for Game Pass, and even better if they then release that in an episodic process to maintain subs on Game Pass. So Gears 1 remake of a remake, and then Gears 2 and then Gears 3, and release it over 3 or 4 months. They could release the first one December, next one in March, July, August, and then the brand new Gears 6 year after. Depends how far in they are, but that would make a good level of delivery, and it's a lot easier to remake a game because you don't have all of the. You don't even need to do voice capture and all that again. It's basically asset generation, porting the engine over to newer hardware, and then any tweaks you make to the game itself. Animation routines you can even reuse. Likely not, but it's a lot smaller. It needs smaller skill set, less resources, less production value than making a brand new game from scratch. So there's definitely benefits here. Sony do it. Microsoft are more than capable of doing it. They should do, in my opinion. That would be a good one for them. And it make a lot of sense to me, as it would also kind of relight that IP, which is still one of the strongest they have, and they need to treat it right, unlike Halo, which I think they've ruined, and unlike Perfect Dark. The Rare studio themselves, totally, they've not used that team enough. They are very talented. They create some of the best games in the world. I mean, GoldenEye was the first-person shooter on the N64. That team doesn't seem to have that anymore. And then there's new IPs. I hope they announce new IPs, but the one thing I really want Microsoft not to do is not to show off games that aren't even in development and just use a CGI reveal, which is just horrible. I don't like anyone doing it, and Sony have really picked up on that. They show games now and they tell you if it's running on PS5 and real time and combination of, and even if it's PC. And that's what you need. I've said this years and years ago. The audience isn't stupid. They can figure it out. So just coming clean early on is the best thing to do, because that makes everyone happy and they know what they're getting. So I really hope that Microsoft do exactly the same thing. And they show something, at least a handful of titles that show they've got things in the back burner all this time that's been quiet, to give people the option that, okay, great, we've got something to look forward to. And hopefully very soon Microsoft will have a collection of games on my Xbox and or PC that I can play that look good, because they desperately need it, and we need the competition. I miss the days of Microsoft of old, the console that was launched for the Xbox One, certainly the Xbox 360, and they've got a huge portfolio, a back catalogue that's very impressive and very rich that they can pick from, not only from themselves, but also from the studios they've been acquiring over the last few years. So they need to make that investment work, and I have no skin in the game. I want competition because that makes everybody better. Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and all others. This is why I'm not a fan of consolidation, and this is why I need Microsoft to really step up and use the money, the assets, and the IP they have and push Xbox forward. They don't need to spend a fortune. They don't all need to be AAA high-quality games, but they need to be good quality games. So let's get some older games updated, improved, with additional elements like Crimson Skies, like some of the old, Wolfenstein from Bethesda. There's lots and lots of titles they could do to balance giving games on a service, getting people into IPs, reinvigorating new IPs and seeing where the interest levels are, and improving Game Pass. And I think that's what they need to do. They need to get games out. They need to stop talking about all these things that are coming, stop apologising for things that they're not doing, because it's getting boring now. And I think, like I say, even the hardest of hardcore know that. So they need to just start putting their money where their mouth is and delivering games. That's the most important part for me. I have lots of respect for teams and talent, and let's be honest, no matter where you sit on the fence, most of the teams and talent sit over on the Sony side, not on the Microsoft side. And Microsoft are the problem. Generally, they can ruin teams and waste IPs, resources, talents, just bleed everywhere because they don't treat them right, because they go in and react to the market. We want this kind of game. We've changed our mind 6 months later. And this has happened on a lot of studios. I mean, this has happened over the years, not just recently, but all the time. So I'm hoping that we get a great show from Microsoft. They show off a collection of titles and something that we've not expected. They've definitely got enough in their portfolio box that they could do that, so let's hope that they do. And I've got a good feeling that they know that, and they're going to use this event to try and take some of the wind out of Sony's sails by putting some good games out there. I don't think that will be the case. I think they just need to get some goodwill back. And that is done by showing stuff, giving dates, giving people the expectations they want, and showing people that they're invested in Xbox and not just about Game Pass and being a publisher, because that doesn't work as a platform holder. They're not the same thing, so they need to balance it out. So I'm looking forward to what they show. Hopefully some good games here, both from a game perspective, but also from a technology perspective, and some new IPs. Some new IPs that are taking risks would also be good. And that's one thing that Microsoft need to do. Take some risks, give talent the time to develop something that's good. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's it. That was a quick one, but I wanted to just cover this one. I have got another one coming up right after the show, which I will get more into the games that are shown. I wanted to keep this one brief. And then a database again next week, which goes into some more hardware and technology stuff that I've been looking at as well, which I haven't seen much on the market. So I just want to kind of give value, and I do want to ask any patrons, please give me some questions if you want them answering on here, because that really adds value to you guys that support me over on Patreon, and I do want to make sure that I give back as much as possible. Anyway, that's it. 30 minutes. That's more than enough of me waffling. I'm out. Please like, subscribe and share and all that good stuff, and comment, because that really helps, and I'll catch you on the next one.